All right, ladies and gentlemen, my dear student. Yes, we're on air now. Hello, be serious. Yeah, today is another good day the Lord has made. We thank Him for everything. And we humbly ask Him to give us the clarity, the guidance and clarity for us to be able to understand what we are going to do here today. Right? Without His guidance, without His wisdom, there is nothing we can achieve. And before that, again, or before we proceed further, we need to give Him gratitude for being with us up to today and guide us throughout. Right. Okay, guys, remember, we are still on this topic, project management risk. We've gone so far, done a lot of stuff here, right? So I just want to round up today. Then we move to the next topic, right? Okay, risk recovery plan. Identify activities. Okay, remember yesterday we talked about this. What should be included in the project risk management plan? Right, risk management plan. If you are commissioned to formulate a risk management plan, so these are most of the stuff that needs to be included. Right, like yesterday we talked about the risk ID, of course, the identification of the risk must have one should be able to identify it, and know which is which. Then we talk about the description. You need to be able to describe the risk articulately so that somebody can be able to know what type of risk that has been identified. And yeah, then you need to know the impact, of course, the severity, right? The probability, the risk exposure, the contingency plan, the risk trigger, then the risk owner, the mitigation to lessen the risk, the adjusted impact after you have put in place measures. For example, for the mitigation to lessen the part. So what would be the adjusted impact as a result, right? Then the adjusted probability as well, right? If you put in place measures or control to reduce the chances. So what would be the adjusted probability now, right? Bearing in mind the control that have been put in place. Then the adjusted exposure, of course, right? Then we say identify activities to recover from the specific, should be risk, right? Risk recovery plan, of which, you need to make sure that, hello, focus, someone is in charge, the name of the person accountable for the risk. So these are some of the measures you need to institute to put in place for you to be able to recover from any risk that may occur, have occurred or may occur, right? Then the person in charge must be accountable, right? That is why you say somebody must be assigned to it to make that person accountable. Then the nature of the risk and the action to be taken to resolve the risk needs to be known, needs to be detailed out, as well as the method by which the risk can be spotted. So, yeah, a project manager should always constantly be on the lookout for opportunity which may arise during the project. All right, guys, you see, risk, as we do know, is something that is uncertain, right? Uncertain event. You are not sure whether it's going to happen, right? It could happen, it might not happen. So you're making a plan to make sure that if it does happen, not to catch you unaware. When somebody or when something catch you unaware, for example, you see what happened just now, right? You were shocked. When shocked just now. When I dragged the chair on the floor. Hello, I'm talking to you, right? You were in a state of shock just now. Why? Because you were not expecting it. Right? You were not expecting it. If you had expected it, you will not be shocked. Right? Yeah. So it's the same thing that in a project, if you don't expect, you don't monitor the risk to watch out to see what is going to happen. Once it happens unexpectedly, the consequence will be, the consequence might not be too severe, but for you to handle it, going to be a big problem. Do you understand what I mean? In some cases, it can be very severe because you didn't prepare for it, you didn't plan for it. So you need to be very proactive in dealing with risk. That is what we say. Project manager should constantly be on the lookout. You know how to be on the lookout. Watch, right? To see whether or what will happen, right? Remember, when you identify risks in a project, hello, look at me, focus. When you identify risks in a project, it doesn't necessarily mean that that project is a risk proof. You know what I mean by being risk proof? No risk, you are covered. It's not like that. Do you understand what I mean? Because anything can happen. You are not God. It's God that knows today and know tomorrow. God knows the beginning and the end. You don't know anything, right? You could say, okay, this risk may happen, right? Then you are able to identify it. There could be some other stuff that you never anticipated, which could happen. We call it unforeseen, that you don't know, it can happen. So that is the more reason why you need to be watch out. You watch that. Once you see any symptom that something unusual is trying to creep in now, then you take action. Does it make sense to you? Right. Okay. You see, the beauty nature of project management is this, right? What I'm teaching you here, it can help you in your personal life, not only in project environment, in your personal life. You watch out where you are to look for signs, right? Because somebody that is always at the watch out is always sensitive, is always careful. You see, it's like when you are driving, you must be on the watch out because it's not only you that is driving, there are some other people that are carefree. They can hit you. You see, that is why in most cases, I advise people don't be claiming rights on the road. Listen, I know most of us are doing that. You say, no, this is a pedestrian. This is pedestrian stuff. I must just walk through. No, you must watch the incoming vehicle. The guy might not be taking notice of that. Then you say, no, it's supposed to stop for you. Then you're going to hit you. You see what I mean? You must watch it. Right. Sometimes, most of the times, if I'm crossing the road, you know how I cross the road? Even if it's a pedestrian, right? I run. Then my wife always tell me, why you always like run? No, I say, you must run because you don't know. Any vehicle can come in, you don't know. You would think that that driver is seeing you. That driver might not be seeing you. And what is going to happen? You can be knocked down. And once you are knocked down, who's going to suffer it? It's you, not the driver. You see? So you must be careful. So here we say communication process for risk threat prevention, recovery activities and opportunities. So everyone must know what is going on, right? In the project environment. Right. Must know what is going on. And the communication will depend on the procedure following the project. Right? Depends on the communication plan. You know what is a communication plan? It's a kind of plan in place, right? On how the stakeholders needs to be communicated or on how to disperse information or information and not information to the stakeholders, right? So it depends on the type of stakeholders as well as the circumstance, the context. So if it is a context whereby you need to be organizing meeting, face-to-face meeting, you can do that. So if it is something that you need to be communicating online, virtual meeting, as the case may be, which is one of the most cost-effective ways of communication of meeting with stakeholders, then you can do that. And the in terms of the regularity, you know, I mean, how often you need to communicate with the stakeholders, it depends on the type of project and the stakeholders. But a plan, the most important thing is a communication plan must be in place that needs to be utilized, of which the stakeholder needs to know when to expect such meetings or gatherings, as the case may be. Then communication is usually done by means of a meeting or a research or a report on the meeting. Yeah, that is what I have explained before. So you need to monitor the risks, which is the purpose of controlling and monitoring risks. What is the purpose of doing that? Right? You need to monitor, control, and monitor risk to identify potential problems in time so that action can be taken to correct those problems. Right. That is what I talked about before. Proactivity. Right. To be proactive, you need to be proactive. Get yourself prepared. When it happens, then you will not be caught unaware. Then monitoring and controlling project includes the ongoing project activities. You need to monitor the project activities that are going on. Then the risk you've already identified against the project plan, right? Because once the risk occurred, and you need to uh, watch out for what we call risk trigger, right? So once you discover that there's a symptom that that risk needs to occur, you need to, what you have to do is you apply the strategies that you've already devised. And you must watch it against or match it against the project management plan, the project performance. What do we mean by project performance baseline, right? That is the standard that have been set. You must make sure that the risk doesn't affect the standard that have been set. Right. So this influencing the factors that could affect integrated change control so that only approved changes are implemented. What are we talking about here? You see, remember in a project management, I told you if when you are identifying risk in a project, what are the documents that you need to look at? Guys, it's very important. Hello, focus. You need to look at perhaps the work breakdown structure to see whether there could be identifiable risk on that in future. Then you need to look at the project plan, the schedule, right? You need to look at again the scope of the project, right? Like I explained to you before, you know, you hardly start and conclude a project without coming across changes, scope change, right? But the most important thing is how do you manage such changes that will not at the end of the day stand in a way of compromising the project objectives. So it's the same thing we are saying here now that you must make sure that any factors influence that could affect the project change control that needs to be monitored in such a way that you must make sure that only approved changes are implemented. Do you understand what I mean? So that is what we are saying here. Then this aspect is very, very important. Very, very important. Although all what I've been saying are important, but these ones are very more important in terms of how often or in terms of the frequency in which it comes out in the exam, right? But they will ask you, for example, the methods to monitor and control project risk. What type of methods can be deployed for you to be able to monitor and control project risk? Excuse. When we said project to monitor and control project risk, I hope you know what we are talking about, right? Yeah. All right. So, guys, to monitor and control project risk, right, you need to observe, right, your works. Observe as the project is being implemented, right? Once you see any sign, any symptom of risk occurrence, then you can raise alarm on how you could deploy your strategy, right, to mitigate the risk, right? The control, remember what we said before. I've explained to you the difference between monitor and control, or monitoring and controlling, right? I said monitoring is for you to observe, to be on the watch out, on the lookout, if you will. The control is to effect corrective measures. Osoze, who speaks Afrikaans here? Nobody? Yaniva, do you understand? Okay. Now, how do you deploy this method? You watch as the project is being implemented. You watch out, right? Now, when you see that the risk is about to occur, then you deploy your strategy. That is, you take corrective measures. That is where the control is coming in. For you, I want you to understand those two concepts and the application of these two concepts in a project environment. That is why I'm emphasizing on it. Right. Then, so what are the methods that you're going to use? Obviously, to monitor, you need to observe. You need to observe. How do you observe? Watch out. Right? You must be on the lookout. Right? Then you need to do what we call regular review. Regular review. How do you review something? For example, right? You've already identified your risk. Right? Then remember, when you were identifying your risk, the project perhaps have not started. Do you understand what I'm saying? The project have not started. For instance, let's say you are working on a project that takes, or perhaps the duration is 5 years, right? You don't know the future. Do you know the future? Right? You just say, okay, this one could be problems. Right? Now, in reality, when you start implementing the project, there could be things that you never envisage. You know what I mean by envisage? Things that you never thought of. That is, envisage means thought of. Something that you never envisage means things you never thought of. Or you can call it unforeseen, right? Because you are not God. You don't know what tomorrow holds for you, right? Now you discover that those things that you never thought of is coming creeping in. Let me use that language. We call it creep in. Like a scope creep. I told you what is a scope creep. Right. Yeah. So what are you going to do? So for you to be proactive, right? For you to be proactive, you need to make sure that you review your plan, regular review. Hello, sit down quietly, don't disturb because you've already constituted a kind of nuisance now to the lesson. Please sit down quietly. Right. So, for you to be able to handle that properly, to be proactive, you need to indulge in this process of regular review. You must review your risk management plan. Let me give you a simple example to bring your mind home so that you can be able to comprehend what I'm trying to say. Remember what happened 2020, COVID, right? Okay. Perhaps there were projects that were started 2029. There were to extend beyond 2020, let's say to 2022. Are you getting what I'm saying? right? Okay, now, before that project started, the project manager was brilliant enough, right, to identify some of the risk that could happen. Perhaps, let's say the project manager was able to identify all the risk, possible risk. Let me put it that way, if you will. Right. Now, all of a sudden, after 1 year down the line, listen, are you listening to me? After 1 year down the line, here come the COVID. Nobody knew about COVID before, right? COVID constituted a lot of risk to a project execution. You look at the way people were meeting because you couldn't go to site face to face, Then most of the meetings become virtual, of which even then people didn't know much about virtual. For you to do a virtual meeting or a virtual presentation, you think it's easy. You see, there it's like you are talking to yourself. How many of you have tried that? People are still struggling to adapt themselves to online meetings, virtual meetings. You see, sometimes you talk, you don't know whether they are listening to you. You see what I mean? So this is what I'm talking about, right? By virtue of that, hello, you, focus, look at me, please. So by virtue of that, you see, it becomes a problematic, right? It becomes problematic, right? For a good project manager to be able to resolve that, for a good project manager to be able to resolve that kind of issue, there should be through regular review, right? The project manager needs to look at the risk management plan that was formulated perhaps before 2019, right? Then it has to incorporate now the new risk emanating from the emergence of COVID to be able to be in a stable condition. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Right. There must be regular review and scheduled evaluation. You must evaluate. What are you evaluating? Whether your strategy is working. You see what I mean? There must be scheduled evaluation. At a point, you need to evaluate it. Are these the strategies that have been formulated to mitigate the risk? Are they working effectively? Perhaps sometimes it's not even working, right? So if it is not working, what are you going to do? You must constitute other ones, formulate other ones that you feel will be more effective to save the day. Does it make sense to you? So methods to monitor and control project risk, they're going to ask you in the exam, perhaps, I don't know which exams, but it's common, right? You say observation, regular review, and scheduled evaluation. Does it make sense to you? Right. If you have a well-formulated risk management plan, hello, and you make your risk management plan to be cast on stone, you don't even do a review, you don't observe whether things are happening to know when things are going to happen. You don't observe, you don't do a kind of observation, you don't review it regularly. And there is no schedule evaluation for you to establish if your plans are working. At the end of the day, you're not going to succeed, right? So that is what we are talking about as far as the risk, the methods to monitor and control risk management is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the story as far as risk management is concerned. Right. Are you happy? So, how many minutes remaining? Maybe I can go to another topic. How many minutes remaining? 20. 22. Okay. You got how many minutes left? 3 minutes.